6 different water systems, or 7 different water systems in a municipality size of Bowen Island is a relatively new concept to me. But I worked for the District of West Vancouver for a few years prior to coming over here as their financial controller, and I was with the District of North Vancouver for a number of years as budget officer prior to that in terms of my municipal experience. So in today's presentation, what we're going to be doing is Bob and I are going to be jointly talking about your water system. I'll focus on the financials and go over a few just quick facts of your water system, and then Bob will go into the details of the water quality report, and most of the questions that you have will probably be answered by Bob as well. So without any further ado, just some, so this is kind of today's summary. And one of the things I was going to mention was, so after we go over these items, we'll adjourn the public information meeting and step into the advisory committee meetings, and you're welcome to stay for those. Essentially, we're going to go over the same information and have elections at those meetings there.
At which point would you prefer us asking questions?
You can ask as we move along.
Okay.
I'll give you an opportunity on each slide as we go through, and I'm more than welcome to stop and answer any questions. So in terms of your water system, this information in terms of the number of water connection is from the 2017 report. So you may have a few more than 146 connections. I believe we billed for about 153 connections in 2017 at the end of the year. So at some point during the year when the report was done, there were 146 connections. I believe we may be about 153. And in terms of the entire district, we've got about 1,200 water connections. I actually added them all.
1199. I did it this morning.
I always talk round numbers, which is probably bad for an accountant, but I kind of feel that people get them better. So your water supply comes from deep water wells. Most of the infrastructure was built in the 1970s, so it would date it to about 40 years old or so, in 40-something years. In terms of the rate structure, there's an annual flat charge of $650, empty lots attract a charge of $423, and there is basically an allowance of up to 7,200 gallons, I believe. Is that per month? Per month, right? 7,200 gallons per month without any additional metered charge. And beyond that, the rate structure is there, and you'd be paying for this first 1,800 gallons, over 7,200 gallons, you pay 2 cents a gallon per month, and then et cetera, as you can see on the thing. And basically, you get one bill a year. So billing frequency is annual. So I graphed consumption in the Bluewater Park neighborhood. So basically, each of the numbers down along the bottom is a residential property, and you can see that your consumption in Bluewater Bay for individual residences is all over the place. The average number of gallons that were consumed between February 2017 and December 2017, because that's when the meters were read, which was 21,900 gallons per residence, and that would have cost, that would have cost about $650, so you would have been paying the flat rate for water there. And what you can see is even if you're consuming close to 80,000 gallons, you're still paying $650 with the 7,200 gallon a month allowance. And basically a property that consumes over about 110,000 gallons would pay about $1,000 a year for their water. It's just to give you an idea of, so most of the properties do fall within the flat charge, is all this graph is meant to show you. And I'm gonna, any questions on the consumption? Sorry, I'll go back to that. Any questions on the consumption graph before I move on to the financials? Okay. So I'm gonna jump into the financial statements, and I'm gonna focus on the middle column there. Those are the 2017 audited financial results. And so essentially we collected $107,000 in user fees. The $758 in other revenue is interest revenue, that was our investment revenue that was earned on your reserve balance. And in terms of your operating expenses, of the 107,000 that was collected, 101,000 went towards operating expenses. 101,000 would be the sum of the lines from the salaries and benefits, the 46,311, down to the other line. The reason we're not including amortization is because amortization is a non-cash expense. We don't pay for it. And the transfers out, actually, I realized when I was looking at this, transfers out normally represent a transfer to reserves, and your transfer to reserves was not $25,000, it was actually about $7,000. So what's included in that line is the acquisition of water from King Edward Bay. It was about 17,000. We had budgeted 10,000, and so that's kind of an anomaly in that over there. So it was actually 7,000 that went to reserves in 2017, and the other 18 that is included in there should go in your operating expenses. So your operating expenses were a total of $100,000.
Correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding 2 years ago at our meeting, we were paying $60,000 annually to King Edward Bay, and you said 10,000.
So you were paying 60.
I understood 2 years ago at the meeting that it was 60,000 a year that
No.
Bluewater paid. Was that incorrect?
No, I've never heard that.
I think there was a budget for, well, what I saw was a budget provision for 10, and the water required was actually about 17
Yeah,
or 18.
might have been 16,000, but
Oh, okay. That sounds more reasonable.
So is that usual? Like, so every year we buy water from King
Yes.
Edward Bay because we run low?
yes.
Okay.
And are we, I'm curious, I'm hearing mostly about that King Edward Bay water. Will we have an opportunity to talk about that later? Or should I ask the question now?
That's
Yeah,
why-
you can ask now if you want. Or you can ask when I do the water report, doesn't matter.
I'll wait.
Sure.
Well, the water report is about quality basically, isn't it?
But I can
And
do other
consumption.
things too, so.
Let's
I guess,
strike
okay,
a
I'll-
committee and decide whether we do it now.
I think it would be a
I'll ask-
better idea to ask that question in Bob's presentation, because he is gonna go over your water system as well. In a little bit more detail. I just gave you some quick facts, and then I think he's gonna talk about how your water system works as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of moving over to the 5-year financial plan, which was passed by council in April of this year, essentially I kept the user fees at 2017 levels because there was no revision to the bylaw. Typically, we would take a look at your operating expenses for the upcoming year and adjust your rates to collect the anticipated operating costs for the year. But because there was so little time and the bylaw hadn't been adjusted for 2018, I went with the user fees that were there and made an adjustment to the transfer to reserves, which essentially was the same as in 2017. And basically the reason that bottom line works out to zero is all utilities, all the revenue to support the operating expenditures of the utility need to be collected from through user fees or through the users, from the users of the system. So utility has to be self-balanced and self-funding. And for the outer years here, I just used an inflationary factor of 2% for each year and extended it out because I can expect our expenses to go up by the minimum by the CPI. I mean, generally expenses for municipalities don't go up by the CPI. There's a municipal basket for goods, so as we need to acquire specific supplies and stuff, that's what will impact the outer years. So have a closer look at those numbers in doing the 5-year financial plan for the next 5 years.
So this year we lost $35,000.
This year you lost 30.
Well, there's a $35,000 deficit on the financial.
Oh, no, you didn't
P&L.
lose 35, sorry, that's the amortization amount, it's a non-cash expenditure. So you
Well, the expenses are 143 and revenue is
Yeah, so
107.
out of those 143 of expenses, if you took out the 35,672, which is a non-cash expense, your expenses would be equal to the
Okay.
107 up above.
Okay, good.
Okay,
So
so
I'm
yeah,
just looking for a provision for,
yeah, we
either
don't
recovery
budget,
or-
oh, okay, we don't budget for depreciation in the 5-year financial plan.
Okay.
So I will change the presentation for next year. on the actual, so it's a little bit clearer and not confusing, and it doesn't look like there's a loss there. Maybe I'll show a subtotal before amortization and then amortization down at the bottom.
Yeah, you might want to do that, because in previous years, what we've usually done, and I stand corrected, is that we have a reserve fund.
Yeah,
When we had reserves, as we did this year, 7,000, you'd see the reserve fund go up by.
I'm gonna show you
You'll
that
see
slide.
that in the next slide.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got that in a separate slide.
Raj,
Raj.
Yes.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and I think you mentioned this a few minutes ago, in future years, instead of this lump of transfers out, is it possible to separate that, so it says transfer to reserve fund and then payment
Yeah,
for
no,
water
I'll
from
fix that,
King?
that
Is
is
that-
an error in the way it's
Oh,
rolling.
okay.
I mean, it is there,
Yeah,
but the roll-up is incorrect.
Okay.
So, I
Yeah.
just didn't realize that earlier,
okay.
so.
Excuse me, Raj, I have a question, I think now that I think of it, it's unfair for you to answer this, but I just want to indicate, now I have a question about the increase over the last 8 or 9 years in the user fees, and I think it'd be best to hold for the councillor who attends. So I'll do that, but remind me.
Okay, I will do.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so if no more questions on the 5-year operating plan, basically the next slide deals with capital. And so I've got the 2017 actual versus the budget, and then I've got the 5-year capital plan numbers here. So in 2017, we spent about $3,000 on, was it on a new pump, Bob? Robin, that was on a new pump. And then we had a provision for $12,000, so I guess you have more than one pump, so in case we needed to replace other pumps. So anything that we spend on capital comes out of your reserves, so if we don't spend it, the money doesn't come out of your reserves. So we had anticipated for 2017, or we put a provision in for $12,000. The reason we put the provision in is if we don't have the provision in municipal finance, then you can't spend that money. So council has to approve that provision. And so the provision is approved, that way if something goes wrong, we're able to fix it. And that's why it's in the budget, and that's what we've got in each of the outer years, is a provision in case things need to be replaced.
Are you saying then a pump could not be replaced because there was no money put into a capital, into this position here? And we run out of water?
We would replace it, but we're doing the right thing by putting the provision here so we can do it, so
It would be a
according
pain in
to,
the butt
with the
when it comes to
legislation, we're
aircraft.
putting the provision in so that we can replace it. But yes, technically, you can make an amendment during the year to the financial plan, but it's a lot of work to do that. You want to have the authority to be able to go and fix something if something goes wrong, and that's
It's
why we
like
put
it's
the provisions
pre-approved,
in.
right? It's
Yeah.
just saying we pre-approved this, you can spend it if you need to. But
Exactly.
if something emergency came up, it's just more paperwork and more effort to get it paid for.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I could just, it's part of Bob's presentation later probably, but in looking at pure numbers, when you're looking at a 1970s system, which I guess is considered pretty old, have we allotted enough money to make sure we're covered for an old system?
So what we're going to be doing is, we have an asset management exercise, which kind of got put on hold between the transition from the previous manager of finance and my coming over here. And so part of that would be taking a look at all of our infrastructure and life cycle costs and the condition of what our assets are and when they need to be replaced over time, so that we can assess what we need to be putting into reserves to be able to take care of the infrastructure we have and replace things. So you would actually take a look at how old things are, what the condition of them is, when a major replacement, and it's usually a 25 to 35 year plan. And so you'd be planning, so you'd be taking a look at 35-year life cycle is what you're looking at. And so then you can plan your reserves accordingly to that. So that is an exercise we will be undertaking. And so we don't know what we need to spend on or we don't have an accurate idea of what is
Well, no, but
required.
also things have widely varying life cycles. The pumps probably only last, what, about 5 years if we're lucky?
Yeah,
3 to 5
3
years.
to 5 years, whereas the pipe will last for 50 years.
so you'd list everything, exactly, so you'd
Yeah.
list everything out with its life expectancy and when during that when money needs to be spent on maintaining it, et cetera, et cetera.
And when's that gonna be done?
That is an exercise that we're just starting right now, so we have some funding approved from UBCM, some grant funding, and we have funding set aside for it. So hasn't been started yet. Previous manager of finance was looking into it, so it will be on my plan for 2019, my work plan for 2019.
So 2019, and do you have any idea how long that'll take?
A full asset management plan can take anywhere from a year to 2 years to refresh, and so I think by next year we should have a better idea of what our life cycle costs are and whatnot, but I basically, until I talk to consultants, I wouldn't be able to give you a timeline, because I'd have to engage somebody external to do that for us. We don't have the resources in-house to.
So
do
Bob,
that.
do you have just an overview assessment of our system?
Your water mains are good,
Okay,
are pretty good.
yeah,
They're all ductile iron, and some of them were put in later than 1970, they were put in
The mid-80s.
85 or something like that. Your service lines, we have lots of problems with them. We found most of the bad ones. So, but you will not see that in the capital, because my guys just go and fix them. So it'd be in the operation part, and
okay.
it sort of gets melded into the operation, just water leaks and stuff like that. So something that, if I was gonna replace part of the water main, it would be in capital, and it would be a lot larger than $10,000.
That's what I was concerned
Yeah.
about, yeah.
That's, when you start seeing leaks in the mains and that, and start to break down, then you're gonna have to plan for it, if we don't have asset management before.
Yeah, if I could just mention to reinforce what Adam and Bob said, it is very, very, very difficult to determine life cycle of pipe and ground. There are too many variables. 10, 12 years ago, whereas this Greater Vancouver Vancouver had water pipes that were still made out of wood.
The wood stave pipes, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Oh,
So that can happen, or it can be 2 years down the road because of bad soil conditions, faulty pipe,
The way it was installed.
the way it was installed. Those are the variables, and you can't determine them. So it's going to be very difficult for pipe and ground, as
Yeah.
you well know. Saved the question for you.
The last slide I have here is your projected reserve balances. So as of the beginning of the year, you have 177,800 in the reserve balance for Bluewater Park neighborhood. We have a projected contribution to reserves of 26,100. If everything that we have in the financial plan is for capital is spent, we'll be drawing down the reserves by 18.2 to a level of 185.7. In all likelihood, very little of that 18.2 will be used this year, so your
Touch
reserve
wood.
balances could be close to $200,000 at the end of the year. And that concludes the financial part of the show.
There you go.
Other than
I'm
questions.
just gonna go backwards, because I just noticed on the previous slide,
On the capital?
what is that? A utility vehicle,
Pardon?
a utility vehicle.
Oh, okay, sorry, I was gonna cover that off, so we bought, and I forgot to, thank you for reminding me. So we bought a vehicle, we replaced an old vehicle that we had, which was basically, it had run its life cycle, it was not gonna be working, it was not safe to use. So we bought, and that vehicle is used exclusively in utilities, and so this is a prorated cost to the Bluewater Park.
So it's for all the water
Yes, for
districts.
all water
And that's
districts,
our-
And we allocated the 6,200 based on the number of connections in Bluewater versus the overall connections in the entire system.
Okay.
1,199?
You were interested in where you could get a vehicle for $6,200.
A bicycle maybe, yeah.
So that was the old red fire truck that you see whizzing around.
Yeah,
It's finally, it's on its last leg, so we bought a different pickup truck.
okay. And what's happening to the old one?
It'll go to Richard Brothers and get auctioned off. It's a 1997.
Yeah.
Low miles, but
2 years ago, at this same meeting, there was a brief discussion about going to charging from an annual fixed fee for everybody to some kind of volumetric charging.
Okay.
Has this gone anywhere, or is it going anywhere?
I will be reviewing the rates as part of the budget process.
Yes.
And obviously it'll come back to this committee. So rates are under review, and I'll be getting feedback. I mean, generally, most municipalities
Mhm.
who have the ability to meter and have meters
Yeah,
do metered. A larger component of the system is metered, or a large component is,
yeah,
to promote conservation, because
Mhm.
water is, with basically climate change and everything else, water is a limited resource, and
Mhm.
eventually your wells will run dry, I'm assuming. But nonetheless, you want people to conserve. So from what I can see, looking at your rate structure, it does not promote conservation of water.
absolutely not.
That's
No.
all I can say at this point in
Yeah.
time, and I would advocate that basically if you wanted to bring in conservation, that the rate structure should be revised to reflect that goal, and that's something your committee will need to kind of
talk
play
about
with
it
action and.
We've talked
we-
about this 15 years ago,
Yeah,
almost 20 years ago.
We also talked about 5 years ago. And
5 years
there-
ago.
there is, the rate structure, in fact, was more skewed towards user pay, or a conservation method. Or you use more, you pay more.
So that's
That's
how
what
it
you want.
should be, but it
Well, no,
isn't.
well, that's a matter of opinion, because there are arguments against that also. So and we went through an extensive discussion about 5 years ago. In fact, the user pay part of it, or the use
Here, I'll go
pay
back
of
to
it,
the graph over here.
is less restrictive, or less part of the total picture than it was previously.
Yeah,
So there was a decision went back according to your feelings about it. But Adam said, we'll discuss it again, and the community will discuss it again. So,
It's
Well,
come
with
up
the-
at the other meetings, and we commit, and Raj being new,
yeah,
has not had time to get his head around that part of the whole thing. And we committed it, I don't know if it was Bowen Bays or whatever, that if there's a new system, and to at least try and get everybody on consistent, we'll have a meeting of all the water systems together to tell them what we're thinking about, and then they can go back.
Well, Cove Bay gets charged according to what they use, right, to a
No,
No,
fair.
Gold Bay gets 400 cubic meters a year, and
Yes,
anything over that, they pay $1 a cubic meter over that.
But maybe not.
400
okay,
cubic
how
meters.
does that relate to these numbers?
well, see, that's one of the things I haven't been able to do. One of my exercises is to get us all on a consistent
Yes,
billing platform and cycle so that we can, introduce efficiencies for staff, because right now, some water bills get an annual, some water systems get an annual bill, other water systems are billed 3 times a year,
Uh-huh.
and others are on a quarterly basis. So it's a mishmash all over the place, and it's
Okay.
quite an exercise for the utility staff to be
Mhm.
able to monitor and compare. We definitely have a tough time comparing and standardizing. So I'd like to kind of standardize the billing process, and
Uh-huh.
then we can do some comparisons and talk about basically the universal approach that you want to take on the island, because essentially, I believe that, conservation of water should be an island-wide initiative, and you'd want to have common goals for the entire island, but maybe I've kind of spoken out of context on that in terms of what my role is here, but
but we heard last night that the Cove Bay system has so much water out of Grafton Lake that they don't have to worry about a thing. And tonight we hear that we may run out of water in Bluewater because the wells could go dry.
A
Now,
lot
Do,
of
they already
that
do, because they pay King Edward Bay.
that is sort of the two ends of a spectrum, right?
So Alfred, just, if you were metered 7,200 gallons per month,
Yes.
over the 12 months, that's 392 cubic meters, so it's almost the same as Cold Bay. If that,
Okay.
7,000,
There's 219 gallons in a cubic meter.
220.
220, 219,
So
so
that-
19
I
something.
think what we would need to do, in terms of your question here,
Mhm.
we would have to do some analysis and situational analysis of
Yeah.
how people's bills would be impacted if you were gonna do that upon direction of the committee, of course.
But
And-
how difficult can that be? The municipality has years and years worth of data for every
It's not
household.
consistently,
And I just don't,
Let me speak to that. I mean, we spent about 2 years in this committee trying to amalgamate with Bowen Bay and King Edward Bay.
yeah,
It fell apart. Okay? Now, no matter what, we live in a democracy and we've got people with different ideas, and there is, because what we're talking about is, in fact, if doing what Raj is doing, and I would agree it's a way to do it, the same throughout the island, however it's set up, that means basically one service area. But putting two together with three, it just didn't work.
but you can use the same methodology for billing without combining the service area,
No, but why have service areas?
because they're set up
Well,
under.
I think we're
there's
going down the
another
rabbit
reason
hole.
too.
Why didn't it work? Like, what
There's
was?
another reason too.
There are differences of
There are
opinion.
fixed costs per connection.
King Edward Bay, they were new, they had new pipe, we had old pipe. That was, I think it was misinformation to tell you the
Doesn't
truth.
have fire hydrants, so
Yeah.
sorts of.
They didn't, we had big reserves relatively, they didn't have any reserves, so we felt that would offset, be to their benefit also. But they didn't want it, and the municipality chose to adhere to that.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
So just, I think the same topic. 2 years ago, there was also talk, which I didn't understand myself, of metering 12 months a year. Is that part of making it equal to all districts, or is that going out the window?
Again, it would be part of the analysis. I don't have an answer for you on that right now. But, I mean, yeah, whatever your metering would be consistent with your billing practice. So, I mean, it wouldn't make sense to meter on a monthly basis if you were billing on a quarterly basis, for example. You'd probably want your meters read on a quarterly basis because it costs you to send somebody out there to read your meters and stuff like that. So, I mean, you want to kind of, that would all be part of what type of billing system we would.
Yes, but you've got to be slightly careful. Monthly readings of these tell you if indeed there's a leak.
Yeah.
You don't want to wait 3 months to find out there's a major leak. That's one side of it. But the second thing is, of course, in the wintertime, meter readings are, I won't say pointless, but we just don't have the demand.
That's the part I didn't understand when I
Yeah.
heard it.
The third thing is that really, and back to Alfred's point, we really need to know what the flat rate is to service a lot. And that's sort of covered off at the empty lot rate. In other words, it costs $400 to have a box in the ground, even if you don't take a liter of water out of it.
Yeah.
And then the rest is the actual cost of taking the water out and treating it and so on. Now, that may not be right. I don't know what the numbers are, but I'm just saying, we have to think about a much more sophisticated way of looking at this. Part of which is consumption, no question. But part of it is just a flat rate for having access to water in the first place.
well, that's how
Yeah.
BC Hydro goes about. You pay a basic fee, and then you pay for every kilowatt hour that you are using.
Yeah. no,
But
they've
you
got-
are paying. Yeah, you guys don't have a basic.
But the empty lot
Yeah, you
thing
do.
is, I
Yeah,
imagine
that's a rough idea.
screws it
Yeah.
up, because it's not like hydro. Part of the value of that lot is that it's serviced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when somebody's buying it or selling it. So it is not directly analogous to BC Hydro.
And you don't get the first 0 gallons for nothing, Alfred, because up here you're paying a flat rate.
For water.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
paying
I pay
$600,
$650 a
and that
year,
gets you 7,000
whether
gallons.
I use 1 drop of water or the full 7,200 every month. And that doesn't sound right to me.
Well, you'd have
So
to,
you-
in this model, you would have to start with 423, right?
If you were an empty
If you
lot.
use no water. Logically, you would have to
Okay.
start. with that.
You'd have to start at some kind of
Yeah.
flat rate in order to recover your fixed costs. You could never go to an entirely consumption-based system because you need a guarantee of being able to collect your fixed costs. And so generally speaking, your fixed costs, you know, what that amount is, or would be ideally, I don't know at this point in time, without doing an analysis on that.
$225 for water, whether you use it or not, is not a bad deal.
Yeah,
There's value to that, because
Yeah.
exactly.
people would prefer to buy a house that has water connections than one where they have to
Yeah.
start looking for
Yeah.
one.
Can we,
Any other questions on the financial section? Otherwise, I'll hand it over to Bob. Thank you.
I was just looking at a water bill, it was at my sister's place, it was weird. So, this is in Ontario, so water, you got charged per your meter, so a 5/8 meter was $10.58 a month, flat rate,
$1,058.
$10.54
Oh, $10.58, okay.
per month. For a 5/8 meter, 1 inch is $16. But for every gallon you use, or they use cubic meters, was $2.70 a cubic meter. Straight math.
It's a straight line, it wasn't a
No, it didn't
conservation.
matter what,
Didn't matter whether they used
Yeah.
10 or 5,000.
At least we have a.
yeah, an incentive to,
Progressive.
but also there's no provision in there for amortizing the cost of the pipe and ground and.
well, that's the $10 a month for your meter, so that's $1,000,
Well,
or
that's,
the $150, yeah.
that's quite possibly a totally different setting though. But
Well,
that's
that
an urban
is,
setting, so
but
we're like, that's different.
It's kind of
We have
the idea, you
So,
pay
yeah.
per meter,
Yeah,
and then you
well,
pay
that's
per
in
cubic.
effect what we do. The empty lot is 423. Now, whether that's right or not is another question, but I'm just saying that there's a benchmark of what zero consumption costs.
So maybe out of this discussion, we could ask Raj, when you're doing your analysis, could you find out what that bare minimum number is? If it is in fact 423, or if that should be adjusted? Like, what's the minimum it costs to maintain the system if you use 0 drops of water? And then what's that, and then that could come back. For those decision-making things, is some water included? Do you just pay the base rate like you're suggesting, and like that's just, would you pay some sort of base rate? And then for every single liter or whatever, it would be nice to have that information when you're doing your analysis, if that's possible.
I think the marginal cost of producing water wasn't very much when we did it to calculate the King Edward Bay charge.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but it varies again by system, because, you know, we're pumping and they're just draining in Grafton Lake.
No, but King
Okay.
Edward Bay.
King Edward Bay.
King Edward Bay.
Yeah,
But you gotta have more treatment if you're draining Grafton Lake than if you're,
yeah, that will change.
Yeah.
And that's the reason for a
But then
special
they've got a
area.
huge capital
Yeah.
expense.
Okay, so we're gonna go on to the drinking water report,
Please.
page 7 of 48. Now, am I on the right one this time?
Light blue.
Light blue? Yes, okay. So Vancouver Coastal Health, actually, we have to make one of these every year. So we've had these since I basically started here. So they're online. You can go and look at these. You don't have to wait till this meeting. They're actually on our website, these drinking water reports. This will be number 6 for me, so I'm gonna zip through some of them relatively fast. So the first part is a summary, then the introduction of Bluewater Park, talks about the administration. And if you have any questions, just stop me whenever I'm going through. Talks about BIM staff and the local advisory committee. Then, now we can get some questions. So the next one is your system. So how Bluewater works, you have 4 wells up by your water tank. The wells pump water, gets chlorinated, goes into your tank. From there, it's gravity out to all your houses. If your wells do not keep up with the demand, then there's 2 meters and you will draw water from King Edward Bay. It's from either side, Captain's Way and Untitled.
So Bob, you had indicated in an email to me this summer that our wells were utilizing King Edward, our system was using King Edward Bay's system this winter. And I don't-
Sometimes, yes.
And I don't understand that. We live in a rain belt, it rained all winter, it snowed.
Your
How-
wells,
How come we're not keeping
when,
up
when,
ourselves?
if you look at some of the usage,
Yeah,
that's where I have to agree with Alfred, is everybody should be metered winter or summer. So in the winter, everybody goes, oh, we
leave the tap.
can leave the
running.
taps on. Your wells will only produce so much. There's 4 wells, they can only produce so much. If you use more than that, you'll have to get water from King Edward Bay.
In your opinion, would we be better to invest in additional wells in Bluewater, or are we better to kick into King Edward Bay? And is that relationship good?
I think the relationship's good. We definitely need another well. After this summer, yes.
In Bluewater?
Bluewater area, whether Bluewater pays for it and it's in a spot, that's something that I have to talk.
Because I feel that our weather has changed. Our new normal is it's drought in the summer, and we're gonna be pushing it every year.
Yep.
Right? And I think that everybody in our community that I talk to is very environmentally conscientious. I've never met people that are, turning it off, don't flush, do this and that. We're all really aware of that. So I would like to be independent of King Edward Bay as they grow, but I don't know, I'm glad to hear you say that we need a new well. Will that satisfy the so-called new normal of more drought?
That's the risk you take when you drill a well.
Yeah.
It could be a dry well.
So,
Yeah.
It depends where the well is. you
It
say.
depends on where the
Could be
well is.
Anywhere in the contiguous area.
I don't think up where your 4 wells are now, I don't think drilling another well in that area,
No.
you're just gonna be stealing from one well to another.
Yeah.
So I've gotta look for another spot. So,
Quick question for you related to that. So between the wells that are in Bluewater Park, King Edward Bay, and Bowen Bay,
Yeah.
are those 3 communities amply
Bowen Bay is not,
provided for if you were
Bowen Bay is
looking
not
at
in the
them
picture.
initially? Pardon?
Bowen Bay is not in
sorry,
the picture.
There were 3
King
that,
King Edward Bay and Bluewater.
oh, just the 2.
No, but-
There is a line connected, but Bowen Bay has never needed water to supply King Edward Bay, and King Edward Bay has
And
never
there's no
needed to give
line.
water.
Okay.
There is a line there
Oh,
that
okay.
can be, if it needs to be used.
So between those 3 communities, if there's lines between them, is the water supply from the wells that we currently have adequate to, it shouldn't make any difference, I would think, cost-wise or use-wise, whether the water comes out of a well in King Edward Bay or out of another area. You just want to make sure that you have an ample water supply, right?
That's what I
And-
understand.
That was the whole direction of the
Yeah.
amalgamation.
And
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Bluewater seems to be completely developed, pretty much. There's maybe a few lots, not many. King Edward Bay is not developed, and it's gonna give more demands in its area. Is it large enough to support
There's gonna have to be another well drilled next year.
in Bluewater?
Or
in King
to
Edward.
help supply the system.
Okay, so the system being King Edward Bay, Bluewater. Okay.
So what about
Well,
Arbutus
I think-
Ridge, the new Arbutus Ridge, what's their requirements for water?
Arbutus Ridge, when they develop that, they have to drill a well and produce 1.5 times what they actually need. That's,
And that's in addition to the well, the other additional well you're talking about, or is that
Yes.
going to be?
Right,
Would that be an extra containment tank as well for them?
years down the road, yes.
Were those not the same general type of restrictions that were placed on King Edward Bay when because that was a private system that came over to the municipality, right? Did they not have some type, as I
I
recall?
didn't bring that box.
No, it wasn't a private system. After it was built, it was actually
Handed
the
over.
municipality took it
Yes,
over.
yes, I realize that.
There's phase
but-
1, and then there's phase 2, had to have its own water, right?
Well, it'll all be part of the same
Oh,
general
okay.
system, but there needs to be another well in order to provide enough.
Okay.
I already mentioned this once before, but I recall coming to a meeting a number of years ago, we're talking about King Edward Bay. And they had to prove.
Yeah,
They had to
Well,
prove water for
prove water.
themselves, yeah.
Well, more than themselves. They had to prove for the expansion and also a factor beyond that, like is applied in most subdivisions now. Well, as you indicated, 1.5.
So is it the municipality of Bowen Bay, or Bowen Island, that owns all the different water municipalities?
Yes.
Water
The
districts?
three we're talking about, 7 in total, or 6 or 7.
Yes.
Yeah, but isn't it?
The municipality owns
all
yes.
of them?
But they're specified areas, which means all those assets are only for that specified area, and the property owners in that specified area pay for all the costs of that system.
So I have, I know people in King Edward Bay, and I know that there's a lot of grumbling going on in King Edward Bay about
Sharing the
Bluewater.
system. Yeah.
using their water as if, it's their water
Is it
and
their
only their
water?
water.
But
That's the-
don't go there. Everybody says the same thing. Bluewater says, my water is better than Bowen Bay's water. So it's all over the island. It's not just King Edward Bay, and it's not just Bluewater. Everybody says that.
But
Like
that-
Eagle Cliff goes, that's my water.
But to answer the question, some of that comes from going back before the municipality, when
Yes.
there were improvement districts.
Yeah.
And they watered, and people, Adam was involved in the Blue Water, I think you were, area. The water is the municipality's water. It is
Yeah.
not King Edward Bay's or Blue Water's
Right.
water.
That's right.
It's a taxation system with the special areas, and that's all it's for, to recognize that there are special costs in delivering some type of service, in this case, water, that is unique to that area, and not everybody in the municipality should pay that.
But for systems, just to be the devil's advocate, I love doing that, for systems that are surface water systems, they have a license and a operation, and your permit for Cove Bay, for example, because it's a surface water system, says the water is to service this particular area.
Well, yeah, the interesting thing is, I don't know, it's to service the area, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
It's saying who owns the water though. The municipality owns the water, not Cove Bay.
for the residents of that area.
Yes, for the use, and they pay for the costs. So
The
there's,
council could decide to put a pipeline across the mountain from.
Are you gonna pay for it?
Okay, we got to carry on here. We've got another meeting. We're not putting Trans Island Pipeline in
no,
yet.
but I think this is a good point. This is part of the big history,
Yes.
is the feeling of ownership. And some of that
Yeah,
came
and
from,
it's really left me feeling
Well, in
about these people that were friends, like,
yeah.
what?
Join the club, because we spent that 2 years, and I felt the same way at the end of it.
So the
Yeah,
cost
like
of the
so
new well that
greedy.
we need
Yeah,
comes out of,
will be out of your
Our
capital.
capital.
Raj didn't know that. I didn't tell him that I was going to spend some money on it.
okay.
And approximately what kind of number?
To drill a well, likely, depends on how deep it is.
And
Likely
again,
by the time you drill a well, you get power, drill a well, power, well shed, 30, 60, $75,000 by the time you're done.
and you may not put it on blue water land,
It'll be on municipal land.
municipal
Well,
land.
that's Blue Water. The
Or,
question is it
Yeah.
a Blue Water area?
Bluewater, King Edward.
it doesn't matter where I put it. It's gonna be
Okay.
our well.
Tell
Our.
King Edward Bay that, will you?
So if it's
We'll
all
put a
muni
plaque on
water,
it that says,
why do
yeah,
we pay
Bluewater.
King Edward Bay for water?
We paid for that.
The deal is because your wells right now do not supply enough water for your system. So when was that?
That'll be a transfer between the reserves, so
Yeah.
basically capital costs were applied to pay for capital in the King Edward Bay area. So that money would go into the reserve to replenish there, that's why you're paying for the water that's coming from there, to pay for the water system there, just because of the way the local areas are currently set up. So it's a transfer from your reserve to their reserve.
I think so, yeah.
To be honest, from a strictly business point of view, it's probably cheaper for us to buy water from Bluewater than it is to drill a well.
We buy water from King Edward Bay.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, who would you buy it from?
well, this again is
The other
this.
specified
It's
area.
transfer of funds,
King Edward,
because it's
yeah.
part of the municipal water.
It's
not-
fund
yeah.
accounting,
Yeah.
that
Yeah, we know about
fund
those
accounting,
accounts,
yeah.
But on the other hand, we need the diversity, and indeed, there's also a long-term question, is just exactly how much water is there on the island?
Well, then
The
there's
distance of where he
desalinization
locates
plant.
the next hole is actually kind of critical.
Yes.
You could put in a desalinization.
We
Buy a
let
nuclear
lot
sub and do that.
We let a lot of water run off. I see an awful lot of water run off.
Well, we'll build a new reservoir then.
There you go, you can do that
Then you
too.
need water treatment,
Yeah.
Yeah, it never ends.
big time.
But it is our most important commodity on the island, really, to survive. We need it.
Yes. So I'm going on to water, any more questions that pertain to water?
Water quality?
Just move on.
So water quality, so in Bluewater, we do 3 different samples, 3 different area, sites. We do one at the tank,
Yeah.
we do one in Captain's Way, and we do one in Windjammer. So every day, the operators go out and they actually take a sample to test for chlorine, to make sure there's chlorine in the water. And then once a week, they take 3 samples and they get sent to Vancouver Coastal Health. So over last year, 2017, we had no coliform counts or no E. coli counts. When I first started here, you used to get boil waters, didn't you?
Is that right?
Because they used to take water off the surface.
Yeah.
And then there was no control of, still had their wells, they didn't surface water, and if the wells didn't produce enough, then you would just start sucking water out of the duck pond, and you'd get bad counts, and yeah.
Duck disease.
Now, I've noticed a change in the last year and a half, a serious change. It's this white, is it calcium? There's a huge buildup now. It's affecting appliances, the water, the tap, white crusty stuff coming out.
Well, we'll look at your wells and see
Okay.
in a minute here,
Okay,
to see what's in there.
okay.
So, so there was no coliform, no E. coli, so you didn't have any boil waters. And then on the farther down in the little graph there, it just shows you some of our readings. So we do 365, we even did 366 in 2016. I don't know how I did that. But 365.
Leap year.
Leap year, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
I never thought of that.
oh.
So 365 readings. The highest we had was 1.19, lowest was 0.18, and the average is 0.82. That's in Captain's Way. But you notice Windjammer, so the samples are taken at the same time. So unfortunately, Captain's Way is always going to be higher because I can't lower the chlorine residual, because then all of a sudden, if I lower it to 0.2 for Captain's Way, Windjammer would be 0. You can't have that. So there's a balancing point there. And then the next page is, THMs and HAAs. This is a good one though, Raj, this is not bad. So, the Canadian Drinking Water Guidelines say that THMs and HAAs is a byproduct of chlorine. When we add chlorine, as it gets eaten up in the system, the byproduct is a cancer-causing agent that is bad for you. So they put it at 100 parts per billion is this safety limit, and 80 for HAAs. You look at yours and you have 3, 7, and then less than 5 and 6. That is very good. That's because you're using deep water wells and not surface water. You went on to surface water and these would be over 200.
And that's because you have to put more chlorine.
You'd have to put more chlorine and kill all the bugs and,
So how do we reduce the calcium?
well, let's see if you got calcium
Oh,
first.
okay. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
So in 2017, there was no major events, just regular maintenance. We replaced a few meters. You don't see it in your capital because we just repair them. If we go through and we put in like 5 or 10 brand new ones, then you'll see it.
Are the meters being read remotely now?
Some of them are.
Yeah, I've got a new one.
Yeah.
So that eliminates.
The little pit pad, no, you still have to go there and touch your wand onto that pit pad.
Oh, so you
But it
still-
saves opening the,
I noticed.
Albert's, I have to do more Albert's to tell me.
That's how it gets its exercise.
Yeah, but crawling around in the bushes versus exercise, there's exercise and there's exercise.
So then on page 10, advisories, we flush your water system. You likely don't have to do it twice a year, but we do anyways. We do it in April, and we do it in October, November. And then we also, you'll see in the papers, users with compromised immune systems, there's a little ad in the paper, that's for all the water systems, that's not just yours, that's for all the water systems. Vancouver Coastal Health asks us to produce that. And then all the rest is just water operators, shows a picture of your water system. The next little bit is just the graphs from your chlorine residuals on page 15. And unfortunately on page 22 of 48, Vancouver Coastal Health wants us to put all these are all the samples that we've sent to Vancouver Coastal Health. All the L1s means less than 1, so you have no coliform or no fecal. Kind of silly to have them, but that's what I was told to do.
Quick question, why was there a sudden sort of spike in up and down in late December of 17? It was raining.
For which one?
Well, for residuals, chlorine residuals. Either Full Captain's Way, both.
Page 16.
One is Windjammer, actually, not Captain's Way.
Oh, you know what? You see how it dropped off?
Mhm.
I think the chlorine pump. Remember the $2,000
Yeah,
pump?
it dropped off, then it shoots up again, and
Yeah.
then it drops off.
Put in a brand new one, and then all of a sudden, because we have to try to level it, it takes time to,
Okay, it's a stabilization.
Yeah.
Okay.
you know, you may think that these are up and down quite a bit, but if you look at one that's on the surface, they will go from the top to the bottom all over the place. So now we get into our Bluewater well. Well number 1. So we do 2 samples a year. We don't do every well. We keep rotating them. So well number 1, this is page 20. Is the ALS thing?
You're looking for one that's got the ALS on the top.
27.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So out of your wells, well number 1, E. coli and coliform, it's 0 and 0. That is good. So anything that is highlighted would actually be over the, if you look at this, there's a column 1, 2, 3, the 4th one over, CDWQG, that's Canadian Drinking Water Quality Guidelines. So if anything is over, then you'll see it in that column, and it'll be all highlighted. So, and you're saying your water's hard, let's see,
Very hard.
I don't think it is. pH is 7.99. And where's your hardness? Should be in there
Oh,
somewhere.
hardness is down at the bottom of the page.
67.7. The aesthetic objective is 500, so 67.7 is not too hard.
Really?
And the other well, interestingly enough.
And
is
the other well-
30.1.
Yeah.
Number 3, yeah.
Yes.
So, but if you go into the next page, well number 3, you see that could be just a bad sample, but there was a coliform of 1, that's what chlorine will do, that'll get rid of that 1. And you're over the limit by a teeny bit with aluminum. But because all the wells run together, everything balances out. It's not like, if all of them had aluminum in the system, then that would be bad, but because you have 3 or 4 wells, the aluminum drops when it gets into the system. But your hardness on that one's 23.
I can only tell you by the visual. It's messing up appliances. I'm not the only one saying this. I never used to have streaks on my shower glass. Now it's all spotty. My taps are getting a white rim of stuff around them. This is like new in the last year. I've never had an issue before.
Could it just finally been building up to that point?
Do you have a water filter system in your house?
No, should I?
What street do you live in?
Windjammer.
Windjammer.
Well, certainly there would have been a big change from some years ago when we were using surface water.
Yeah,
to
but
surface
that
water
was
also.
10
Yeah, exactly.
10 years ago.
Yeah,
The switch over to, well, we always did have well water, but we were mixing them, so you wouldn't have noticed it as much. Now, of course, there is no surface water. The real question would be, is this an effect of the water we're getting from King Edward Bay?
the damn water.
I don't know.
You can blame other people, but I don't. I'll look on there.
Have you noticed?
Certainly we've observed.
Funny enough, King Edward Bay's water,
Yeah.
Being a man, I don't notice it, but
one of the wells,
apparently.
the hardness is 58, and the other one's 69.3, so they're actually lower than,
It says something is depositing out, or what it is,
Well, can you get whatever the white stuff is analyzed to figure out what it is?
if you want to do that, you can.
I don't know, maybe I just need a filtered system.
well,
I'm not the only one though,
Yeah.
I hear this from a lot of people, so.
what I notice is that occasionally we get a white deposit in the morning, but then it dissolves. If you try and capture it as a sample, it dissolves, so.
So it could be air. If it's
possibly,
those.
Yeah, but it's at the bottom, it's not rising.
Oh.
It settles.
But doesn't calcium usually go that reddy rusty color? Like you get that rim
What I'm talking about is,
around your appliance, around your toilet.
yeah, what I'm talking about is white.
Is white.
I don't know what it is, I can put it in a bag if you want, you know, if you keep your kettle and you empty your kettle, there's a lot of white stuff there. And if I pour the kettle with a tea bag, I'll have white stuff, I'll drink the tea and I'll go, oh geez, there's a lot of white stuff in my cup.
Wow.
And I've never had that before.
Well, let's collect a couple of samples. I'll give you a sample out of our tea kettle as well.
Yeah,
It's a white, well, whitish, I wouldn't describe it as white.
yellowy
Flaky
white,
solid.
something, yeah.
Could it be
Have a
something,
flavor.
oh, is it particular to your pipes? Like that's the only thing I'm wondering, if some of us have it, some of us
Brand new
don't.
house.
Yeah, I know you're a brand new
Yeah.
house, but.
I don't know.
Well, most pipes are plastic. At least from the mains.
In the house, yeah.
Yeah,
From the mains to the houses, not all, but I think
No.
most are. Anyway,
well, it's just a question mark for
And
you.
what do you think the orange stuff is? Over time, the plastic on the shower turns orange around the corners, or?
Well, that's that,
That's calcium.
my understanding is that, what's that red color is an
The
article.
red color would be iron, wouldn't it?
Well, no, it's sort of, that's from your THMs or your HA,
HAAs.
yeah.
Bob, just one question.
Yep.
On the turbidity, well, one I'm looking at. What's NTU? No? I couldn't
Yes.
find it in.
It's on the back here.
Oh, is it?
There's
Yeah.
one, you go right to the back of the
Right at the very
translation.
back, it'll tell you.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah, you know,
Because there shouldn't be much turbidity for well water.
sometimes you'll get it, like if you're,
Whatever.
I'll tell you what it
No, they
is.
don't.
yeah, it's a turbidity unit, something, but
but how that's defined is,
But high or low, I don't know. And there's no aesthetic objective, that's odd, with turbidity.
But turbidity at the top, yeah, in BC it's 1 turbidity. It shouldn't be over 1 NTU.
So we're over
1.0.
We're
If you're 0.25,
30% over.
Well, number one's
1.3, yes.
Yes, yes.
But
Turbidity-
because everything is together,
Yeah.
it gets dissolved. Or,
Okay, don't worry about it. We don't know what it is, let's not talk about it.
and that's all I have to say unless you have any questions.
Okay.
Sorry.
Is that bad?
How did King Edward Bay's system do with this period of dry weather? Did they have lots of water?
I heard from your guys that they did have a lot of water.
Their wells pump constantly.
Yeah.
So they're in good shape for the growth of that district?
If we cut, yes. The whole system is working, but if we have another dry summer like we have next year, I'm recommending that we put in a well
I
For
approve.
them.
I approve.
for the system.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
For this system.
how long does it take to
That's
put
a
in a
bit
well?
To drill it, a couple weeks, get hydro, a couple months. Build a building, not too much.
And where does the money come from?
It'll be coming from your reserves.
So
No, we
are,
have enough.
are we able to be proactive and get that in before next summer? Or
I
like,
would
how
like
does
to.
the process work?
Well, the next meeting is
Well, what we would do is in the budget process, I mean, Bob and I will take a look at what needs to be done, and then we would make a recommendation to council to include it in the 5-year financial plan in the 2019 plan, and if it's approved.
And that's
And
in
then they have a
February.
public consultation period for the 5-year financial plan, so the public, you get public input. And then when it's approved, you can go ahead and do it. in
And
that
that's
year.
February, that the
So
budget's get
the
approved?
budget will be approved in about February or March, yeah, typically February, March.
Great.
Well, we can actually bring this up at the next half of this meeting, because this is a meeting of the advisory committee.
Well, this is the information meeting right now, so
Yeah,
once
right.
we go to the advisory
The
committee,
advisory
then we
committee.
can
And
pass a motion
pass
supporting
a
it.
motion. Previous years, we actually did have provision for another well, it's just we didn't know when we were gonna need to drill.
Yeah, that was many years ago. And then remember I fracked it,
Yeah.
or I did high pressure water injection.
Yes.
And it does, the wells in the winter produce more, a lot more. But in the summer, the actual amount of water that they're trying to get, there's just not enough now.
Which then sort of takes us to the much larger question, is exactly how much water is there on Bowen Island in total, let alone the Bluewater. And if we're running dry during summers, it means that,
Well, you're not running dry, your wells
well,
are,
yes, they're producing less, yeah.
yeah,
Or taking longer to catch up.
yes.
And there's also a question of the actual interstitial pressure of water in the rock. Salt Spring has a real problem where that's now become negative, and they're getting salt water intrusion in parts of the island, which unfortunately shouldn't affect us, but, okay.
Well, that's very
On that,
So if no more questions, that concludes the public information part of the meeting, and I think Steph has got to do a little bit of change in setup, and then we'll start with the local advisory committee.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay, I mean, it's an open public
the
meeting.
status is-
You know what I mean? It's an open public meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.